I know I'm not going to do the information in this video justice, but I'm just going to do the best that I can, and you all can do with it as you please. The last video I talked about how Jesus is the one, he's the person, he is the one who is qualified to deal with the problem of what to do with the remnant of Israel, how to get them from Jerusalem into this place in the wilderness. When the abomination of desolation takes place, they're supposed to flee into the wilderness. Now, we read about that in Matthew 24, and Luke 21 tells us that when people see armies surrounding Jerusalem, that they're supposed to flee, and this is actually the same event. But we all know that the remnant of Israel probably isn't going to be reading the New Testament, but the Old Testament prophet Zechariah talks about this same event when the earth is going to split open and people are going to flee through an opening in the Mount of Olives, and that the Lord is going to be the one who leads them. In Revelation chapter 12, we read about how the woman has the wings of a great eagle with which to be carried into the wilderness. And in Exodus 19, we learn that God himself bore the nation of Israel on eagle's wings. So what we're talking about here basically is a second Exodus, only this time it's not from the land of Egypt, although according to Revelation 11, they're going to flee from Sodom and Egypt, where also their Lord was crucified. In other words, the city of Jerusalem is going to become like Egypt, and the place from which the remnant of Israel will have to flee into the wilderness. Now, in the original Exodus from Egypt, these people did not guide themselves, they didn't feed themselves, they didn't lead themselves. All this was done by God. God sent the angel of the Lord, in the pillar of cloud and fire to guide them, and he fed them with manna. He personally protected them and met every single need that they had for the 40 years that they wandered in the wilderness. They crossed the Red Sea on dry land. They saw their enemies. The horse and rider of Pharaoh was thrown into the sea, but they crossed over on dry land. So these were all miracles that took place as part of the first Exodus. And there is going to be a second Exodus of the remnant of Israel from the city of Jerusalem. And Jesus is going to be the person who guides them out. So I promised you in the last video that we would talk about the place where Jesus is going to be leading them. In the process of working on the video, talking about the place, I realized that Zechariah chapter 14 actually gives us more information about the path, the actual pathway that the children of Israel are going to use when they flee into the wilderness. A while back, I did a video on earthquakes in the Middle East, and I showed you some earthquake fault lines that run through the nation of Israel. There's a major fault line that runs from the Dead Sea way up into Syria and joins a fault line in Turkey. There's also an east-west fault line that runs through the Mount of Olives. So what we have here is basically two fault lines, and we know from what we read in Zechariah 14 that the fault line that runs east and west through the Mount of Olives is the one that's going to split open. So let's take a look at that passage where we can see that. Zechariah 14:3. Then the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations as when he fights on a day of battle. And on that day his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives, which lies before Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east to west by a very wide valley, so that one half of the mountain shall draw northward and the other half southward. This valley is going to be a very wide valley that runs east and west. Verse 5, and the valley of my mountains shall be stopped up, For the valley of the mountains shall touch the side of it, and you shall flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah. Something I didn't mention in the last video, but I have mentioned it in other videos. This Uzziah, who was the king of Judah, he was a really great guy, very smart, did a lot of stuff. You can read about him in 2 Chronicles 26. He loved the Lord, except for he had this pride thing going, and he wanted to offer incense in the temple. And of course, he wasn't allowed to do that. He couldn't do that. And when he went into the temple to offer that incense, he was struck with leprosy. And according to Josephus, there was a huge earthquake that took place at the time that Uzziah went into the temple to do this. So there's kind of a correlation there between when the man of sin will go into the temple of God, and then there will be this earthquake, and also this earthquake that happened in the days of Uzziah, and according to tradition was on the day that he went into the temple to offer incense. And then it says, and then the Lord your God will go, is how I see that word, and all the holy ones with him, or all the sanctified, separated out ones will go with him. So this is when he leads that group, that remnant, into the wilderness. So he is personally going to guide them. But the point here is that what we're dealing with is this wide valley. There's a couple of ways we can look at that. Some translations say that you shall flee to the valley of my mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach to Azel. Okay, Azel is actually a location that's about a mile away as the crow flies from the Mount of Olives, and can also just be a word. So for example, we're going to look at the word Bosra later on. Bosra can be a city, which it is. There's a city named Bosra in Edom. It can also be an improper noun, meaning a sheepfold or a fortress. In this case, Azel can just mean foot or bottom or side of the mountain, or it can be an actual place. If it's an actual place, it's about a mile from the Mount of Olives. We might be talking about a mile wide split in the earth, where there's this valley that's created that runs east and west. So what that means then is that the remnant is going to be fleeing toward the east, toward the Jordan River. So if you've been to Israel, you know that Jerusalem is high up there. There's on the mountains of Jerusalem, and you always go up to Jerusalem because it's situated at the top of a hill on Mount Zion, Mount Moriah. And when you go down toward the Jordan River, toward the Dead Sea, of course the Dead Sea is the lowest place on earth, and so when you're heading down that way, you're going way down the mountain. So the feeling that we get here, though, is that there's going to be a very wide opening, that many people will be able to just run through this opening, and it's going to extend all the way down the mountain to probably right about Jericho, where the Jordan River is. Now, if the mountains are moving north and south, okay, as I'm trying to see this in my mind, how this would work, you can see where it's possible that the Jordan River may actually be dammed up by that east-west fault line that runs perpendicular to the Jordan River. So you would have a fault that is moving, perhaps cutting off the flow of the Jordan, so that now there isn't any water running to the south, which would make it so that this group of people could actually go across on dry land. And then later in Zechariah, it says that there's going to be water flowing east and west from Jerusalem. Verse 8 of Zechariah 14. On that day, living waters shall flow out from Jerusalem, half of them to the eastern sea, and half of them to the western sea. It shall continue in summer as in winter. This is a river that's flowing from some kind of artesian underground source that is going to move both ways, both east and west. It'll go toward the Mediterranean as well as to the Dead Sea. And I think that this is going to be at the time that the remnant of Israel flees. So this earthquake will move the ground in such a manner as to block or cut off the flow of the Jordan so that these people can cross over on dry land. And of course, prophecy is pattern, and we've seen this pattern before where the Israelites went across the Red Sea on dry land, and then with Joshua, when they're going to come into the promised land, the Jordan dried up so that they could cross over. And then again with Elijah, he hit the Jordan River with his mantle, and the waters basically backed up, and he and Elisha went across on dry ground. So this is a phenomena that's associated with the Exodus, and it's also associated with Elijah. So this is basically how I'm visualizing the actual path that they're going on. There's this earthquake. The mountain moves both north and south, Mount of Olives. People flee through that opening. It's wide, it's very big, and a lot of people can go through, and it'll make a pathway all the way down from Jerusalem, and where the people can actually cross to the other side of the Jordan River, basically on the Jordanian side of the river. And once they're on the other side of the river, we have a couple of options about where they can go. Traditionally, people have said, well, they're probably going to be going to Petra, which is in Edom or Jordan, and that they would be in a place called Bosra, which is also in the present country of Jordan. And here's the passage that people use. It's from Isaiah 63:1. Who is this coming from Edom, from Bosra, with crimson-stained garments? Who is this robed in splendor, marching in the greatness of his strength? So we see this person, this is Jesus, and in Revelation 19 we see him with the blood-stained garments. In Isaiah 63 we see him coming from Bosra, from Edom, in these blood-stained garments. And so we assume that he is bringing the remnant out, and that's where they've been. And the reason we think that is because of another passage which has the name Bosra in it. And that's in Micah chapter 2, verses 12 and 13. This is talking about the remnant. So I'm going to read it for you in King James first. I will surely assemble, O Jacob, all of thee. I will surely gather the remnant of Israel. I will put them together as the sheep of Bosra, as the flock in the midst of their fold, and they shall make a great noise by reason of the multitude of men. Okay, so this is the Lord assembling this remnant together. He's going to put them together as the sheep of Bosra. Now, like I said earlier, Bosra can either be a place, a city, or it can simply mean a sheepfold. And other translations actually use the word the sheepfold, or a flock in its pasture. So let me read another translation. I will surely gather all of you, O Jacob. I will collect the remnant of Israel. I will bring them together like sheep in a pen, like a flock in the midst of its pasture, a noisy throng. The one who breaks open the way will go up before them. They will break through the gate and go out by it. Their king will pass through before them, the Lord as their leader. So the Lord is going to be the shepherd of this flock, and that's Jesus. And so now we have to decide which Bosra. How are we going to interpret this word Bosra? Are we going to interpret it as the city that's in Jordan, in Old Edom, and associate it perhaps with Petra, or are we going to use it as just the noun, a sheepfold, a place where you keep sheep safe and fed? Because that'll determine whether or not you're going to go north or south to a place. So one of the things that I've talked about just over and over and over again, I've already touched on it once in this video, is that prophecy is pattern. We're looking for prophetic patterns. We're looking for, has this been done before? Is this just another iteration of something that's happened in the past? Because that's kind of how God explains new things. It's based on, Old Testament examples and even New Testament examples of how this was done before, and that gives us a clue about how he might do it in the future. So there's another passage that gives us an indication that perhaps we're not going south toward Petra, but actually going north toward another place. And that is Micah chapter 7, verse 14. Shepherd with your staff your people, the flock of your inheritance. They live alone in a woodland, surrounded by pastures. Let them graze in Bashan and Gilead, as in the days of old. So Bashan is sort of up by the Golan Heights, but Gilead, where's Gilead? Well, in this map here, you can see where Gilead is. It's north of the Dead Sea. It's above Jericho. It's on the eastern side of the Jordan River, not too far away from the Jabbok River. So that's something to commend it, is this passage that talks about God shepherding his people in Bashan and Gilead. Okay, so is there a place near Gilead or in that area of Gilead that has been used as a refuge for other people in the past? At the time of the prophet Elijah, there was a king, Ahab, and he had a very wicked, horrible wife whose name was Jezebel. And Jezebel had these prophets of Baal, and they were all really big into Baal worship. And Elijah was big into worshiping God. And basically, he told Ahab, as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years except by my word. And the word of the Lord came to him, depart from here and turn eastward and hide yourself by the brook Kerith, that is east of the Jordan. And you shall drink from the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there. So he went and did according to the word of the Lord. He went and dwelt by the brook Kerith, that is east of the Jordan. And the ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. And after a while, the brook dried up because there was no rain in the land. So God provided for Elijah because he was going to be killed. I mean, he had a contract on his life, and God had him go to a place of safety where he could be fed by the ravens twice a day, and he could drink from the water. And this place, Kerith, is a very rugged place. And I'll show you some pictures here that were taken by a man who did some archaeological digging in this location. As you can see by these pictures here, that it actually is a rather beautiful place. There's a lot of green grass. This is the entrance to Wadi El Yabis, which is the current name for where this ravine, Wadi, this brook Kerith is. And it's still there to this very day. And here's another picture where you can see how rugged it is. And this ravine, Kerith, the name Kerith actually means cutting off or a separation. And this is a really interesting name because God is going to be taking this group of holy ones, separated people who've been separated from the city of Jerusalem, separated out from a bunch of the other Jewish people, and they're going to be brought into this place to be kept, possibly even the same place where Elijah was kept safe from Ahab and Jezebel. So somebody sent me just a really interesting video that talked about a Jesus hideout in Jordan, and the man who's doing the video is an archaeologist. He's a Christian guy, and he's able to take various passages of the Gospels that talk about Jesus, and he was able to make a connection between the location where John the Baptist was baptizing people, where Jesus himself, perhaps with his disciples and his followers, went to spend some time so that they could be safe. So this James Tabor decided that he would take it upon himself to excavate some places, and he found some very, very interesting things there that indicate that during the first century there was baptisms and all kinds of things being held in this location near the brook Kerith. And I'm not going to get into all the details, but I will leave you the links so you can watch the video and get a copy of his paper where he explains how he ended up at this conclusion. But I think he's probably right. So when things got really hot for Jesus and he needed to kind of get out of Dodge, as it were, it's very, very, very likely that he went to this place by the Jordan, a specific place that was safe. It was rugged. It wasn't a place that was, on the beaten path. You had to want to go there. And even today, if you want to go there, you have to really want to go there because it's a very narrow road and it's very rugged. But it is a safe place. The other thing that this area has going for it is that there's water and it's not as hot. And if you were to go down to where Petra is, that's really out in the wilderness. It's really kind of in the desert. And there, at one time, people had a way of harvesting water. And, that's when Petra was first built. But nowadays, there isn't anything there. It's just a tourist attraction. But there isn't any like water flowing or anything like that. But up in the northern area in Gilead, there is water. As long as it's raining, the brook Kerith will keep flowing. So the place is probably up near the city of Pella. If you had to walk from Jerusalem to this wadi and you were to follow the Jordan River, and by the way, the Jordan may actually be stopped up further up toward the Sea of Galilee up there, so that the actual Jordan basin where the Jordan River flows could be used as a pathway even. So this is a highly seismically active zone from time to time, and there are large earthquakes that do occur here. In fact, the one that happened at the time of Uzziah was so catastrophic that Zechariah, who lived 200 years later, is talking about it. So when Jesus takes his flock into the wilderness, and I'm assuming they're going to go north, up toward Gilead, up toward the brook Kerith and this wadi. I'm assuming they're going to go that direction as opposed to going south. So once they get there, though, how are these people going to be fed? Well, in the wilderness wanderings, God fed them using manna. In all four Gospels, we read about how Jesus fed the 5,000. And I think that this is a picture of Jesus having the ability to provide food for thousands of people. And in fact, in John chapter 6, after the people had been fed in the feeding of the 5,000, they wanted Jesus to keep doing this. They wanted him to keep feeding them. Verse 30, so they asked him, what sign will you perform so that we may see it and believe you? What will you do? Our fathers ate manna in the wilderness, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. And this goes into Jesus' sermon, his talk about how he's the bread of life and he was the bread that came down from heaven, and that people needed to eat him and follow him and believe him. And then the Jews began to grumble about Jesus because he said that he was the bread that came down from heaven. Verse 48, Jesus said, I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna and in the wilderness and they died. This is the bread that comes down from heaven so that anyone may eat of it and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats this bread, he will live forever. And this bread which I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. And at this the Jews began to argue among themselves, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? So Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I tell you, unless you eat the flesh and drink the blood of the Son of Man, you have no life in you. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up at the last day. Verse 57, just as the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so also the one who feeds on me will live because of me. In Matthew 24, where this is the Olivet Discourse, Jesus is talking about the end times. Verse 27, for as lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the parousia, the coming, the appearance of Christ. He's the only one who can deal with the situation. For wherever the body is, there the eagles or the vultures will be gathered together. Okay, this picture of a body being fed upon by the birds of prey, by vultures or eagles, this is the picture that Christ is giving us here. And it's kind of the same picture that when Jesus was talking about, you have to eat my body and drink my blood, okay, or you have no life in you, that he's the carcass that people have to feed on because he's the true bread of life. Okay, so just as, you know, before in the past when I've talked about how Jesus is the carcass and the birds of prey that are gathered around him are the remnant of Israel, and that wherever the body is, there will the gathering be of the birds of prey. People have basically taken offense at that I would call Jesus the dead body. But in John chapter 6, Jesus is saying the very same thing. He said, I'm the body you have to feed on. I am the bread of life. My body is food, my blood is drink. You have to partake of me if you want to have eternal life. Jesus being the bread of life and this carcass that's being surrounded by birds of prey who are attracted to it is kind of one and the same. And another layer that's put over this is the whole idea of this miracle of the feeding of the 5,000. And then there was another miracle, the feeding of the 4,000. And after the feeding of the 5,000, there were still 12 baskets of food left over. So this shows that Jesus has the power to feed people in the wilderness. This is a kind of a foreshadow of what he's going to do for the remnant of Israel when they go into the wilderness. The passage here also says, for as lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. So this is Jesus coming at the time of the abomination of desolation to gather this group of people and lead them in an east-west manner through this oak valley, and then he's going to take them across the Jordan and presumably up to this place in Gilead. And they're going to have to move very, very quickly. And believe it or not, Micah chapter 5 verse 7 talks about the speed with which this will need to be done. Then the remnant of Jacob will be in the midst of many peoples, like dew from the Lord, like showers on the grass, which do not wait for man or linger for mankind. So they're going to be here and then they're gone. They're going to be there and then they're just going to disappear. They're going to be gone along with the Lord quickly as lightning flashes from the east to the west, and then it's over. And if you've missed your opportunity, you've missed it. Now, Revelation 12 also tells us about how the dragon, Satan, is going to send a flood of troops after these people, following after. And we read that the earth comes to the help of the woman. And that is, again, it's similar to the Exodus when Pharaoh and his army tried to follow the children of Israel through the Red Sea, and basically what happened there was the waters came back on Pharaoh and his army. In this case, it's not the waters coming back, it's like the earth is going to close up over them. So I'm not exactly sure how all of this will work, but there is a giant earthquake that's going to take place at that time, and it says 7,000 people are going to be killed in that earthquake, and 1/10 of the city will fall. And the geography of that place is going to be totally different for the rest of the time of tribulation. Okay, for the rest of that 42-month reign of the beast, the 1,260 days that this group of peoples kept safe in the wilderness, Jerusalem is going to be up way high, and then there's going to be basically a sinking of the ground and water flowing in a brand new river flowing both east and west towards the Mediterranean and also toward the Dead Sea. So this topography is going to change quite a bit. And it's going to be like that until Jesus returns. There is a city back in the day, at the time of Christ, that was called Pella. And rumor has it, there's a tradition that just prior to the Romans getting ready to sack the city of Jerusalem and tear down the temple, that early Christians realized that this was going to be happening, and they fled to the city of Pella, and that's where they were kept until things got safe. So the city of Pella doesn't exist anymore. The Bible tells us that this group of people is going to be led into the wilderness. They're not going to a city, so they won't be at a city. They're going to be out in the middle of nowhere, not near a city. I think that's the indication when you see the word wilderness. They're going to have a place of safety. They're going to be inaccessible for whatever reason, however it works. They're going to be totally inaccessible to the beast and to Satan. They're not going to be able to get at these people. They're going to be kept very safe. They're going to have food. They'll have shelter. There's a lot of caves in that area. They'll have water. And the Lord himself will feed them. This is going to be a totally miraculous event. And this is one of the things that I think is really, sometimes as Christians, we know that the miraculous happens. We know that God has dealt in very unusual and incredible, not normal, not natural ways in the past, especially when he's delivering his people, the children of Israel, from Pharaoh and Egypt. And he's going to do this again, okay, in a big way. This is going to be really big. And the whole supernatural world will actually not be in the background anymore. It's going to come to the front. It's going to be totally in your face, between the fallen angels coming out of the pit and being on the earth, and all the fallen angels coming out of heaven, the dragon, Satan, being on the earth, all of these wicked spiritual entities being on the earth and not hiding themselves anymore. They're going to be totally out in the open. The supernatural is going to be the order of the day. And I think that's something that is like very surprising to a lot of people, a lot of Christians. It's hard to even think in terms of, miracles and all of those things taking place, plus having so many bad entities on the earth, including hybrids. So when we're talking about the days of Noah, we're not just talking about, people having alternate lifestyles or anything like that. We're talking about actual hybrids. We're talking about actual fallen angels being on the earth and taking over this place that God has given to us. So this is the days of Noah are like really going to be the days of Noah, with all of these beings here that have been tucked away or hidden away or chained away. They're all going to be here. And Jesus is going to supernaturally deliver his people and feed them supernaturally and guide them and create the environment where they can be saved, create the pathway, create the place, and then be the provision for the food, not just the physical food, but also the spiritual food that's going to come from him being with them. For 3.5 years, this remnant is going to be in the wilderness, and Jesus has a plan for doing something with these people. They're not just there, wandering around. They're there for a reason. Remember, this is the group of Israelites, Israelis, Jewish people that Jesus is going to use for the foundation of his new Israel. And these are actual descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God knows who they are. And because they have been chosen to be kind of the foundation for the new Israel, which is what I call it, I don't know what else to name it, because the present day state of Israel is going away. This is going to disappear. This does not have an eternal destiny, the current state of Israel. But God has a plan for the nation of Israel to be a kingdom under his Son, the Lord Jesus Christ. These people are going to need some kind of preparation, and Jesus is going to be doing something with them. So the Old Testament prophets talk about that. So what is Jesus going to be doing with this group while they're in the wilderness? What's the plan? What's the purpose for it, besides just saving some lives? There's a big purpose for it. We're going to talk about that in the next video. So I apologize if this has been a little hit and miss, a little kind of all over the map. And I do have notes, sort of. I'll make them available to you. There's websites you can go to and other videos you can watch as well. So let me know what you think in the comments section, and we'll see you on another video. Till then, have a blessed day.